Chicken Parmigiana, or chicken Parmesan as it's usually called in the US, is an Italian-American dish dating back to the 1950s. The most common method of preparing it at home is to bake breaded chicken like a casserole for about 40 minutes with the sauce and the cheese. Some restaurants do this and then they reheat it when an order comes in, but the results tend to be a bit slimy and greasy that way. This method enables you to make it fresh in just a few minutes, and the taste and texture are just what you would expect from a fine dining restaurant. So I've got about 250 grams of tomatoes, fresh fine ripened tomatoes, olive oil, 120 grams of passata, 200 grams of the chicken broth. It's jellified because I made it myself. There's another video on here. You can see how I made it. This is from volume 3 of my cookbook. This is the Hungarian tertiary additive, but you can substitute a little paprika and cayenne. It'll be okay, as explained in the annotations at the start. So your purpose here is you want to have a flat surface like this that can lay down in the pan. I'm using a 4-liter pot here, and you add enough oil to cover the bottom. Swirl it around a little bit like that. Give it a few seconds for the oil to get hot, and then you add the tomatoes. I'm just going to add them all at once, and then I'll turn them over so that they're facing the right way. You want them skin side down. And as soon as you have them all facing the right way, then don't turn them around, don't move them anymore for a while. Let them really cook like this for 5 or 6 minutes. After about 6 minutes, you can start to smell the change in the cooking. It's starting to get caramelized. The next step will be that it'll actually burn. We don't want to take it to that level. So I'm still not stirring it though, but I'm going to add the passata. And still no stirring. And also during this time I have chopped up the garlic. We're going to let that stand out in the air before we use it, as explained in a couple of different places in my cookbook series why you do that. So this is just going to sit and continue cooking, and put a splatter guard over it to keep it from making a mess, and wait a few more minutes. It's been about 6 more minutes now. Now I'm finally going to stir it some. And scrape up any of the fond off the bottom as best as possible. Now I'm going to add the Hungarian seasoning, because that's what I'm using. This would be the time you add the paprika and cayenne if that's what you're using. Cook it like this for just about 1 more minute here. 1 minute. Okay, it's been a minute. Now I'm going to add the garlic. It's cut up. And we'll give this just a few seconds. Just take the edge off of it here. Incorporate it. Just 15 seconds. It's enough. Okay. Now the chicken stock, the broth, excuse me, chicken broth, and the thyme. And I'm going to reduce the heat down. It's been on between 7 and 8, and we're going down about 5, medium right now. Melt this and keep it at a simmer. Maintain it at a good simmer for about 15 minutes. Then transfer it to the cup of a stick blender, or if you're doing a larger scale, of course, use a regular blender. After it's blended, you take a taste of it and you decide if it needs a little bit adjustment. Okay, typically you're going to need to add a little bit of dark brown sugar, maybe half a teaspoon or so, maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon, and sometimes a pinch of salt, although this seems to be okay for salt this time, and then reblend it a little bit. And then for better results, you rub it through a sieve. You don't absolutely have to do this, but this will get rid of any tomato skin fragments and bits of the dried thyme that are in there. it'll make a more professional product when you're done. But like I said, it's not absolutely necessary. I have 80 grams of carrots that were boiled for about 20 minutes, so they're pretty soft. Garlic that was cut up coarsely and left to stand for a few minutes. And the 2 eggs. And then here's the breading station to set up. This is the carrot, egg, and garlic mixture. This is just some plain flour. And this is equal parts by weight of Parmesan cheese and breadcrumbs. I'm just going to mix this together by hand. If you need more of this as you're going, of course. Here we have a typical boneless, skinless chicken breast. And it's got a flap like this, as you can see. What we're going to do in order to make this work, cut off this ends like this. It's too small and too big. And this chicken, the chicken I just cut off, can be used for something else. But what you want is you want to take this and cut down through the middle. And then you won't have to pound the chicken. It'll be just fine the way it is. Okay, this is a little bit thicker on one end than on the other, but it's, in fact, this is quite a bit thicker on one end than the other. Cut off just a little bit more here. Okay. Now, we have a lot of scraps here, but this is typical in a good restaurant. You end up with this sort of scraps to end up with nice, perfect pieces here for cooking. And these scraps get recycled into other things. You can use them for soups and stews or whatever. So these are the ideal pieces that we're going to use. You should end up with 6 fairly uniform pieces. Carrot puree here. And then into the Parmesan and breadcrumbs. Okay. Now we're going to do these one at a time in the oil, because that will produce the best possible results for frying. If you throw a bunch of them into a pan all at the same time, you lower the temperature of the oil down. Whole thing becomes kind of greasy and not good. So one of the secrets to doing this is you do them one at a time. If you have to do a lot, get 4 pans on the stove on different burners and do 4 at a time. But don't try to put one pan with lots of oil and then put lots of chicken in it, because it'll be a greasy mess. So the pan is at temperature, oil's at temperature. Put the chicken, put it down away from you so it doesn't splash into you. And you can use a splatter guard to start counting the time. When the time's over for the first side, of course, flip it over, continue. Now you have all the components assembled that you need for this. These chicken pieces, after they've been fried, they're fully cooked, so you really don't have to worry about them spoiling. And they're going to stay crisp for quite a while, at least crisp enough that by the time they come out of the oven they'll be perfectly fine. We have the sauce already made. We have wet pack mozzarella. And all you have to do now to finish it is spoon some sauce on, put the mozzarella on, put it in the oven. You can do as many or as few as you like. Put just a little bit of sauce down beneath it. Take one of these. Spoonful of sauce over the top, but don't go crazy. Good piece of mozzarella, and then this goes under the broiler as explained in the annotations there. I'm very pleased to announce the release of Volume 3, The Focus on Food Chemistry.
I want to clear up a few things about these 3 volumes. First, they all contain completely different information. There's no duplication, they're not revisions. When I wrote Volume 1, I had 2.5 years of YouTube videos to cover. People had been asking me for the printed list of ingredients for all of those dishes, and so I obliged. There are recipes with stepwise directions and many tips offered throughout, as well as an extensive history of Russian cuisine over the last 1,000 years, but Volume 1 is very different from Volume 2 and 3. In volumes 2 and 3, I only had about 9 months of YouTube recipes to cover in each, so I was able to provide stepwise directions for everything. In volume 2, I included a lot of additional information about cooking and some simple examples of flavor chemistry to set the stage for volume 3. While volume 2 hopefully got you thinking about some of the processes that go on in cooking and how flavors are expressed and sensed at the molecular level, the topic was painted with pretty broad strokes to make it easy to digest, pun intended. Volume 3 is a milestone of the series, in which I have included an entire introductory course in food chemistry, which is why Volume 3 is about 70 pages longer than Volume 2. And if you just want the recipes, that's okay too. You don't have to read the first few chapters, but if you've ever been curious about what influences tastes and flavors and the rationale for deciding cooking times and temperatures, and why things taste different when they're combined in different ways, this book will answer many of those questions. It also paves the way for Volume 4, which will be next year. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link.
Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.